So, Sonic Frontiers. This is it, huh? This is the game that got so many of you whipped into such a frenzy? A frenzy so extreme that you basically launched a denial of service attack on the Game Awards in the hopes of cheating your way to victory? Which, for those of you watching many years in the future, didn't work, by the way. Sonic Frontiers ultimately lost the Player's Voice Award to Genshin Impact, and Sonic fans were called out for cheating live on stage during the ceremony.
And once we took out all the bot votes, the Game Award goes to Genshin Impact.
This is what you've been hooting and hollering about because finally, supposedly, they made a good 3D Sonic game again? Did they? Did they really? Because I've played Sonic Frontiers to completion now, and folks, I don't think I see it. Oh sure, it's better than Sonic Forces, no question there. But that's not exactly a high bar to clear. I'd argue that a lot of Sonic games are better than Sonic Forces, including a lot of bad ones. Sonic Forces was just worse than most. I would actually say Frontiers isn't even that much better than Forces either. It inherits a lot of its problems, some of which have been long-standing problems in the Sonic franchise for many, many years. But that's also sort of a topic for another day, and maybe we'll finally talk about that soon because we don't really have time to cover all of that right now. This video is only about Sonic Frontiers and the quality therein. Or lack of it, I guess. And I get it. Food always tastes better when you're hungry, and some of you are very clearly starving. But for the sake of consistency, we should back up a little bit first. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about this video's sponsor. You know, the 2023 edition of SAGE, the Sonic Amateur Games Expo, is right around the corner. That's the online event where lots of indie and fan game developers show off their games to the public, and it keeps getting bigger every year. There really is no better time than right now to learn to make games. Everybody's making games nowadays. But take it from me, somebody who has been dabbling in game development since 1998, you probably shouldn't teach yourself. Not only can it be really slow, but it can lead to serious gaps in your knowledge. Some of my friends have been begging me for years to ditch my oldest game creation tools, but I figured I was comfortable where I was. Now there are game ideas I'd love to play around with, but I feel really behind the curve when it comes to using something like Unity or Unreal Engine. The best way to make games is to go to school for it, so why not go to Southern New Hampshire University, this video's sponsor. SNHU's affordable online degrees can teach you a wide range of game development skills, including incredibly fundamental things like just properly planning out your project. That's one of those things that's hard to learn on your own, and I can't count the number of rookie game developers I've seen bite off more than they can chew because they start out making games that are way too big for them to handle. And I mean, I myself have made tons of games that have fallen prey to this. With SNHU, you'll gain a better understanding of how games are made at a core level, giving you a leg up on everyone else that struggles to finish their own projects. And that's just one of the many different things you'll learn right from the comfort of your own home. They'll also teach you programming, 3D modeling, even world building, and so much more. To get your head start in game development, just visit snhu.edu/blazehedgehog and use my page to sign up for your free enrollment information. You'll be helping yourself and helping me continue make great videos. Sonic Frontiers was released in 2022 as Sega's next big mainline Sonic game. It was apparently slated to be released in 2021, lining up with Sonic's 30th anniversary, but in a shocking twist, the game was internally delayed an extra 12 to 18 months for additional polish and bug testing. This is notable because that never happens. The last time it happened was Sonic Boom Fire and Ice for the Nintendo 3DS in 2016. And the last time before that was, well, I guess never. That we know of, anyway. But it's safe to say that it actually never happens due to just how quickly Sega could pump Sonic games out, and how they very definitely suffered for it. So right away that should have been a good sign, a point in favor of Sonic Frontiers. It's almost like somebody over there was trying to do something right by giving this game more time to finish cooking. This was further bolstered by an announcement made by Sega that with Sonic Frontiers they were targeting high review scores, which is kind of a weird thing to say, right? It's like they're admitting that they haven't been targeting high review scores with past Sonic games, which kind of feeds into a long-standing theory I've had. Sonic games have been one of Sega's best-selling franchises, right? But to put it kindly, you might say that a lot of them are only really popular with Sonic fans. When it comes to critical reception and mainstream appeal, modern Sonic games have struggled, and they've been struggling for a long time. But if some of your best-selling games are bad, well, how do you, as a company who wants to continue making more money, deal with that? Like Sonic 06, right? That game needs no introduction at this point. It's a beautiful, awful train wreck. Setting aside all of the irony and schadenfreude associated with it, it is in the running for being one of the most broken, most unfinished, most downright unplayable Sonic games ever made. By all definitions, Sonic 06 was a failure on every single critical level. But here's the thing, Sonic 06 sold tremendously well. It sold well enough that it was included in a charity bundle with Viva Pinata and Shrek 3, and it was even inducted into the Xbox's Platinum Hits line of games, a prestige usually reserved for games that hit big sales numbers in a short amount of time. Despite everything, it is considered a success. So how do you follow that up exactly? I'm sure that some of you out there are saying to just make a better game, but what does that mean exactly? The idea of better can be very subjective. One person's trash is another person's treasure, after all, and if Sonic fans like their games a certain way, and they're the ones emptying their wallets for you, well, you're best served giving them what they want to some degree, right? I'm not suggesting that Sega was making Sonic games bad on purpose. Nobody ever intends to make bad games on purpose because that's a great way to lose a job or even destroy a business. I'm pretty sure Sega wanted to do the opposite of that. But I think this ultimately led them to try and approximate something they didn't necessarily understand, which is how you end up with garbage like Sonic Lost World and Sonic Forces. It certainly doesn't help that by this point, it's impossible to actually define what Sonic the Hedgehog is. Those original Genesis games were 30 years ago, and since then, Sega has reinvented the Sonic franchise at least 4 times. Modern Sonic has been everything, which is the same as being nothing. Mario, you can point to and say that all of his mainline games are about the joy of jumping. Super Mario Bros., Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario Odyssey. All these games where the beating heart at the center of everything is jumping, with solving puzzles and exploring levels supporting that idea. You can't really do that with Sonic as much because there are crazy people out there who swear that speed was just a marketing gimmick and say that the best Sonic game was the first one from 1991. I don't trust those people. So what is Sonic the Hedgehog? It depends on who you ask and when you ask them. And when you think about it, by this point, almost everyone who knows what Sonic should actually be has either quit the company or been arrested. Twice.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
There are only a small handful of developers still employed at Sega right now who were actually around for the formation of Sonic, and even then, they still came somewhat late to the party. Though Kazuyuki Hoshino was the original character designer behind Metal Sonic for Sonic CD, he did not formally join the Sonic development team until the production of Sonic Adventure. The same goes for Yuji Uekawa, who was around as an artist on Ristar, but did not touch the Sonic franchise until the Sega Saturn. And before you say anything, I choose to believe I'm saying Ristar correctly, and nothing you say will change my mind. Even Takashi Iizuka, currently the most seasoned Sonic developer at Sonic Team, was only an apprentice during the production of Sonic 3. He was actually being trained to replace Sonic's original game designer, a man by the name of Hirokazu Yasuhara. Once Sonic 3 was completed, Yasuhara resigned, and Sonic Team took a hiatus from making Sonic games. Takashi Iizuka's first real Sonic game as lead designer was actually Sonic Adventure almost 5 years later, and it was one of this franchise's big shifts. Whereas the Mario series has always had guys like Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka, Sega completely failed to keep any of Sonic's original development team around, and they all found work elsewhere. Any institutional knowledge of Sonic's signature gameplay elements were pretty much lost to time decades ago. Future Blaze popping in to say that in the nearly 2 months I've been working on this video review, Sega has revealed Sonic Superstars, and it features the return of Sonic's original character designer, Naoto Oshima. It's the first Sonic game he's worked on since 1999. Since I know it'll come up in the comments, that's not quite the same as what I'm talking about here, since Oshima quit Sega almost 25 years ago. It's nice to have him back, and his input is obviously having a positive effect on Sonic Superstars, but his involvement probably isn't permanent, and it even sounds like he was the one pushing Sega to let him work on a Sonic game again, not the other way around, tying into the idea that Sega did absolutely nothing to preserve the team that originally defined Sonic. Anyway, back to the video. As one final sidebar, we should also keep in mind that Sonic as a series has always been more popular outside of Japan, even though most of its development team is inside Japan. So if it's your job to take this thing that maybe you don't really understand, that a lot of people seem to hate, that also somehow manages to be one of your company's top 10 best-selling games pretty much every year, how do you keep following that up? Well, you give Shadow the Hedgehog a gun. You have Satan stab Sonic through the heart with a Kamehameha in front of his human girlfriend. You give Sonic a sword, turn him into a werewolf, get him to drive a car. Retcon the timeline, then re-retcon the timeline again, and then re-retcon the timeline until nothing makes any sense anymore. And you hope that something somewhere along the way sticks. That you crack the code and eventually figure out what the true form of Sonic the Hedgehog looks like. Because they tried to do a nostalgic throwback to the old Genesis games, and it did not go well. They had to bring actual Sonic fans in for that one to make sense. So when Sega comes forward and says they're going to make a game people will actually like for a change, well, I'm sure there are people on the Sonic Frontiers development team that breathed a sigh of relief, because it finally meant they weren't chasing the impossible nightmare anymore. But then, if you're the third or fourth generation of developers that don't really understand what Sonic is, where does that lead you? Our story opens with Sonic, Tails, and Amy Rose hot on the trail of the 7 Chaos Emeralds. For mysterious reasons, the Emeralds have suddenly left their resting place and are being drawn towards the Starfall Islands. As they close in on the islands and make preparations to land, a strange vortex appears, wrecking their plane and swallowing the trio. Sonic then wakes up somewhere on the Starfall Islands, presumably the only survivor of whatever just happened. He's then confronted by a mysterious voice, which congratulates him for being the only one to ever escape cyberspace. Sonic has no idea what the voice is talking about, but it claims his friends are lost in this cyberspace dimension and must be rescued. Being no stranger to rescuing his friends, Sonic agrees, sight unseen, and sets off across the first of the islands looking for more information. What Sonic doesn't know is that Dr. Eggman has already come to the Starfall Islands, researching an ancient technology said to be stored there. During his research, Eggman accidentally awoke something dangerous and unknown. A being that can cross the boundaries between the physical realm and the digital. But before he can learn anything more about it, he ends up being the first to be pulled into this cyberspace dimension by an unseen force. To make matters even stranger, seemingly at the same time as all of this, Knuckles finds himself instantly transported to the Starfall Islands by a strange piece of technology that activates on Angel Island. Upon arriving at the island, he encounters a strange little girl, and he too is seemingly lost to the realm of cyberspace. It now falls on Sonic to figure out what's going on and rescue everyone while he's still able to do so. That's because while Sonic himself may have somehow escaped cyberspace, he is paying the price for it. Some kind of a digital virus is spreading throughout his body, slowly killing him. So not only does Sonic have to save his friends, but he also has to weigh that against finding a cure for his cyberspace infection before he dies. And to be honest, that's kind of all you get for most of the game. Sonic Frontiers is all about its mystery, but the game does little to deepen or expand that mystery. Most of the game is spent touching base with all of Sonic's friends, one on each island, and repeating the same song and dance of Sonic realizing he can't save them yet. There's a lot of dialogue about how weird the Starfall Islands are, but not much in the way of useful information. The only real sense of progression you get in the story is Sonic's sickness, which gradually gets worse over time. The only other real narrative hook is that little girl Knuckles encounters. Given the voice that Sonic hears appears to be that of an older woman,
find the Chaos Emeralds, destroy the Titans, tear down the walls between dimensions.
I started to wonder if the two were connected somehow, like maybe the little girl was a younger version of the voice Sonic was hearing. But it's revealed pretty early on that the little girl is known as Sage, and she was Dr. Eggman's computer system he was using to research the Starfall Islands. Once he activated the Ancient's technology, it transformed Sage from a simple computer program into something more closely resembling a human. Is she flesh and blood? Is she a hologram? We don't know, when the game never tells us. Actually, Frontier spends a long time dancing around Sage's identity like it's one of the game's great mysteries, but they give you the answer almost immediately. They frequently show her talking with Eggman in cyberspace, and there are even audio logs where Eggman talks about how she was created.
Sage is performing at peak efficiency. Makes me wonder where I went wrong with Orbot and Cubot. Not only is she taking control of the Ancients network, but she's harassing Sonic as well. I love it!
Yet, upon reaching the last stretch of the game, Sonic talks about learning who she is like it's some kind of great revelation. It's weird. Which is the vibe for a lot of the story, really. Most of the plot is delivered at the very start and very end of the game. The actual meat between those 2 points is a little weird, but decent overall. It has surprising callbacks to longtime Sonic lore, and it has meaningful character moments too. There's probably more characterization in Frontiers than all Sonic games from the last 15 years combined. It feels like somebody finally took notice of all the complaints about Sonic being such an emotionless brick and actually let the guy emote for a change. There's a lot of great character moments. The friendly rivalry between Sonic and Knuckles, or Tails struggling to grow up and become his own person. It feels much more substantial than the scraps they've given us in past Sonic games. But around that, the order in which everything is told to you often makes it feel alien and bizarre. The best example is on Kronos Island, the very first island in the game where you encounter Amy Rose. Sonic's first conversation with her is pretty basic. They talk about how Amy is some kind of weird cyberspace ghost, she comments on Sonic's infection, and the pair agree that they need to find answers and rescue everyone. Your second conversation with Amy, she tells you how she has to help a weird rock confess its true love. What's the context of this? We're not given anything to go on. The weird rock in question is a creature called a Coco, but the game does nothing to introduce these little things to you as characters. Up to this point, a Coco is a collectible item used to upgrade Sonic's stats, but now you're telling me they're like self-aware beings with thoughts and feelings and social needs? Amy starts talking about them like we're supposed to just know what we're looking at, but we don't. It feels like something's missing. And that feeling pervades all throughout Sonic Frontiers. Though it may have great character moments and the overall impact on the Sonic lore is cool, the way the story is told to you feels awkward and disjointed, like they're skipping over important events. Maybe some of these blanks will get filled in by the upcoming DLC at the end of the year, but that still means they shipped a blatantly unfinished, broken version of this narrative, and that's not great. The gameplay of Sonic Frontiers ventures into new territory for Sega's Hedgehog by being the first Sonic game to go open world. Ever since the release of Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2001, more and more games have been dabbling in open world gameplay. That's kind of a gross oversimplification to describe games like Jak and Daxter, or Forza Horizon, Skyrim, or Halo Infinite. But it's true. Ever since Grand Theft Auto 3 demonstrated its particular brand of freedom, more and more games have been pushing to tear down their boundaries and open up their worlds. Heck, even Mario eventually went open world with Super Mario Odyssey. Or it kinda did, anyway. Some could say Odyssey's levels are just the Super Mario 64 formula, but there's something more natural, more open, and less linear about the areas in Super Mario Odyssey compared to past Mario games. If anything, Sonic is late to the open world party, and it's easy to see how Sonic the Hedgehog as a character could benefit from having large, wide open spaces to really cut loose and go fast. The issue here is that Sonic Frontiers isn't open world. It's a supposedly new term they're calling open zone. To me, it sounds like a marketing buzzword, sort of like how Sega repeatedly boasted about blast processing back in the 90s.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't.
Now I know some of you are already scrolling down to the comments box to correct me on that one. That some developers claim that blast processing was a real programming technique that was simply never utilized. And the thing is, open zone does actually mean something. It just doesn't mean very much. What it means is that instead of being a normal open world, it's cluttered full of tons of Sonic junk. Rings, springs, floating platforms, and grind rails clog the skyline of the Starfall Islands. To call it an eyesore would be an understatement. Mostly this stuff is here to facilitate the huge number of collectibles in Sonic Frontiers. You can find experience points chips that you spend on Sonic's skill tree, strength and defense seeds that can enhance Sonic's combat abilities, the aforementioned Cocos that can be spent to increase Sonic's ring capacity or top speed, purple coins you can give to Big the Cat to play his fishing minigame, portal gears to unlock cyberspace levels, vault keys to unlock Chaos Emeralds, and lastly, memory tokens that are primarily used to gate story progress on each specific island. A lot of these are supposed to be gotten in specific places. You'll often find memory tokens or enhancement seeds at the end of an open zone cluster, for instance. Cocos and fishing coins are usually near ruins and high up cliffs, that sort of thing. But a lot of it feels like pointless busy work. Open zone segments are a pacing nightmare. It's like they took a bunch of Sonic levels, chopped them up into tiny 5-second chunks, and then scattered them like confetti in random directions around each island. None of them feel connected to each other, and they make each island feel annoyingly homogeneous. Unlike a Sonic level, where one stage may focus on challenges with grind rails and another stage may be about springs or water or spikes, the open zone stuff in Sonic Frontiers never really changes or evolves. Every island has the same types of grind rails, the same springs, the same platforms, over and over and over again. It's pointless, directionless clutter, and it strangles the personality out of each island. It feels like you're repeating the same actions everywhere you go. It also just makes an island difficult to interact with sometimes. The memory tokens you collect are given to whichever friend Sonic is attempting to rescue, but thanks to the strange, cluttered layout of every island, and the small size of the characters themselves, they can be nearly impossible to see. It doesn't help that a lot of these story NPCs are often just standing out in the middle of nowhere, far away from landmarks. You often run right past them because they're not usually in places you'd think to look, like near cyberspace portals or Chaos Emerald vaults. One of the last things I do on a given island was use the minimap to mark story NPC locations, because otherwise I could never find them on my own. It bolsters the very uncanny, disjointed vibe that carries so much of this game. It even extends to the lore of the world itself. For story reasons, these are supposed to be lived-in spaces. The Starfall Islands are home to a very long-lost, long-dead civilization with ties to the Master Emerald and the Echidna tribes seen in the original Sonic Adventure. What this means is that while you trek across one of Sonic Frontier's 5 open zone areas, you'll often run into structures built by these ancients, and the game's somber tone brings to mind games like Breath of the Wild and Shadow of the Colossus. However, unlike those games which strive to portray their ruins as believable, livable spaces, most of the ruins in Sonic Frontiers feel like empty set dressing. One of my favorite areas in Breath of the Wild is Fort Hateno. During that game's apocalypse, Hateno was the site of a great battle for the future of Hyrule. Breath of the Wild shows this area 100 years after that battle takes place, and the ruins tell a story about what happened there. It's littered with broken Guardian robots, rusted weapons, and though nature is slowly reclaiming the ruins, the fort still stands. Without the game even having to say a word, you can feel the history resonating from this place. And that kind of silent storytelling is all over that world. What's with these bones? How did that mountain get cut in half? Are these the ruins of Lon Lon Ranch? Sonic Frontiers occasionally points out that what you're looking at are houses or satellites or weapons, but it's rare that it feels like anything organic. Settlements are too small, too spread out, and they don't have the necessary texture of a society. What did they eat? Where did they eat? What did they do for fun? Did they have a religion? What did they worship? Did they have art? The game eventually tells us that they had science, but where did they study that? What does it look like? Just to be clear, I'm not asking for fully detailed explanations for these questions. That's not the point of what I'm saying. Sonic Frontiers, first and foremost, is about a mystery, but it does an incredibly poor job of stoking the fires of that mystery, content instead to rearrange the same ornate stone wall over and over and over again, as if they were attempting to assemble meaning from table scraps. Sometimes that's what real history is, but this isn't real history. Sonic Frontiers is a product for entertainment. It's created to generate specific feelings, and it does so by giving us the right number of puzzle pieces that we need to complete the picture they're trying to build. Whatever fragments Sonic Frontiers presents us with, there are too many blank spaces to even hint at a clearer image. Instead, they fill in those blank spaces with that open zone junk. Even if it were possible to get a big picture view of the Starfall society and how it functioned, it's buried under so many endless rings, springs, grind rails, and platforms that it's impossible to see much history or mystery. It's so desperate to remind you that it's still a Sonic game that it forgets to stop and let its world breathe. Now, a recent patch did add a series of action chain challenges to the open world, which does at least force you to think of the space more like, say, a Tony Hawk game, where you're trying to build a flowing combo through the world. But it doesn't really help all that much, because it's being bolted on top of a world that it really wasn't designed for. It doesn't tie into Sonic's existing progression systems, it's just a distraction that lets you chase high scores. It can be enjoyable, sure, but the open world still is what it is, which is a weird, boring, disjointed mess. Especially when you consider that you almost never actually have to interact with the open zone stuff if you don't want to. Sonic has a new ability called the Psy Loop, which lets you draw circles on the ground and activate whatever you loop around. It feels like a fun nod to Knights on the Sega Saturn and your ability to perform a paraloop in that game. In every open zone map of Sonic Frontiers, there's a lot of these treasure chest icons scattered all over the place. and if you side-loop around them, they often just give you collectibles without having to do anything. Heck, sometimes you can even just side-loop around nothing and a bunch of stuff will just pop out of the ground. There's tons of everything, everywhere, and while some will see that as a benefit, to me it feels like a mea culpa to have made so much gameplay that is specifically designed to be ignored. This isn't Skyrim, where you have hundreds of hours of quests and must prioritize only what you personally think is interesting. This is Sega admitting that parts of this game aren't very good and letting you skip them, but they still wasted the time and the money making them anyway when other parts of the experience definitely needed more work. And then there's the controls. Despite Sonic Frontiers smartly including a ton of options to customize Sonic's controls to your liking, it was hard for me to find something truly comfortable. Sonic jitters and twitches along the ground as he runs like a freshman's first Unity student project, something you definitely don't expect from a professional development team in a multi-million-dollar game. Sometimes touching a polygon the wrong way will suddenly fling Sonic 100 feet into the sky, and you can deliberately break the physics to scale up sheer walls in ways that do not feel intentional. I'm all for fun sequence-breaking tricks, but this isn't like a Cryonis launch in Breath of the Wild, where you're exploiting how the game's simulations interact with each other in order to pull off something new and unexpected. This is the game actually breaking apart in your hands, and in a way that feels really sloppy. Though I welcome the fact that boosting has been moved to the right trigger, how Sonic boosts has been changed for the worse. In all previous boost games, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, even Sonic Forces, you could press and hold the boost button down to push Sonic forward, using the analog stick more like the steering wheel on a car. What this more often meant is that during scripted sequences where the camera angle is constantly changing, I'd just fully let go of the analog stick until the camera lined back up behind Sonic, using the boost more as a general go forward button. It didn't matter which direction the camera was facing because as long as I was boosting, Sonic was following the scripting. It was a useful tool for dealing with how often Sonic games change the camera during gameplay. If you hold down the boost trigger in Sonic Frontiers and let go of the analog stick, Sonic will instantly stop on a dime. Doesn't matter how fast you were going. Sonic goes from top speed to frozen dead in his tracks in less time than it takes to snap your fingers. No momentum, no anything. And while a patch did add the ability to adjust Sonic's rate of deceleration, it doesn't change the fact that you still stop boosting when you let go of the analog stick. It's awkward and destroys more than a decade of muscle memory I've developed to cope with how these games choose to play. It's bad, which is to say nothing about the camera itself, which will sometimes lock you into a scripted 2D segment against your will, and other times will present you with something that looks like it should be scripted, but isn't. There's one particular segment in the back half of the game where you have to climb a series of radio towers, and you're often presented with narrow, winding roads that, up to this point, have been scripted segments where you can just hold down the boost and watch Sonic zip around. Trying that here just launches you off the tower. Except there are also nearly identical segments in this very same tower where that type of scripting is used. It's impossible to know if scripting will save you or not until you mess up and fall off. And I did fall off. Live. On stream. I fell off over and over and over again because the game kept breaking its own rules without telling me. I was furious. Have these people never made a video game before, or is it just bugged? With Sonic games, you can never be sure. And man, we haven't even gotten to the puzzles yet. The other part of Sonic Frontiers that is most directly analogous to Zelda are the puzzle sections you'll find dotted around the open world segments. Solve a puzzle and pieces of your map get discovered, marking nearby objects like guardians to fight, other puzzles to solve, cyberspace portals, and so on. But whereas Zelda would mark an entire region after you activate a tower, Sonic Frontiers marks random little squares that often aren't even connected to each other. This leads to a lot of frustrating scenarios where you want to know what's at a specific location on the map, but can't find the right puzzle that will reveal what's over there. Or worse, a puzzle will only reveal a small piece, but not enough of what you need. The puzzles themselves seem pretty charming at first, though a lot of them fall into the camp of use the Psy loop to activate a thing. Some of them use Sonic's abilities in interesting ways, like a strafing challenge or having to race to a goal in the open world before time runs out. But it doesn't take long before the well starts to run dry. Even just by the second island, you'll start encountering repeats of puzzles from the first island. These repeats do get progressively harder, but by the fifth tile puzzle, I was getting pretty bored of this stuff, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Some puzzles even have the audacity to be locked to specific times of day. There's nothing worse than wanting to reveal a specific part of the map, only to be told that the puzzle in question can only be solved at night. And I'm pretty sure you can't even just stand around and wait, either. How long a day lasts in Sonic Frontiers seems to change depending on several factors, possibly even including how fast Sonic himself happens to be moving. I ran some preliminary tests myself, and at the very least I can confirm that while standing still, a full day in Sonic Frontiers from sunrise to sunset lasts a little over 30 minutes. I also recorded a moment where the clock froze for over 30 minutes in the middle of the night one time because it was waiting for me to stop idling so it could begin a Starfall event, which is sort of like this game's version of a blood moon from Breath of the Wild. I unfortunately didn't get footage of the Starfall itself, but the game definitely waited until I moved the analog stick before it started the event. My point is, if you come across one of these time of day specific puzzles and you can't do it yet, your best bet is to just ignore it and hope you remember to come back later, because otherwise you could be waiting a very, very, very long time. It is beyond strange. A couple times per island, you'll also be required to complete a special puzzle minigame as part of a story event. Almost all of these are universally bad. They usually entail turning most of Sonic's abilities off so that you can do things like herd Coco, or do an extended skydiving sequence, or a hacking minigame that's a bullet hell shooter for some reason. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why a Sonic the Hedgehog game needs any of this stuff. With The Legend of Zelda, those games have been about puzzles and mysteries since the beginning. The secret is in the tree at the dead end, that kind of stuff. But this goes back to what I was talking about at the very start of this review, about how there's nobody around who seems to know what Sonic the Hedgehog is anymore. Do people come to Sonic for bullet hell shooters now? Or light beam puzzles? Even if nobody knows what Sonic is anymore, in the broadest sense, the games were still at least about bouncing around and going fast, right? All of this open world stuff, whether it's the puzzles or the open zone junk or whatever, it feels like busy work and not actual gameplay. It's something for you to do while you listen to a podcast or watch YouTube on another monitor. Is that really something we should be celebrating as what finally makes Sonic good again? Low effort, low engagement distractions? Breath of the Wild, and now especially Tears of the Kingdom, at the bare minimum, taught creative problem solving. Its shrines only ever suggested solutions, but whatever worked, worked. And that's what was great about it. In Sonic Frontiers, you're presented with a drawbridge that looks like a huge ramp. Boosting up the bridge using Sonic's speed and using it to launch across a ravine has you smack into an invisible wall and then fall to your death. the bridge must be lowered via a puzzle minigame that is decidedly unsonic. It's the worst kind of frustrating. Even Mario, for as much as Super Mario Odyssey also embraces its various open worlds, never strays too far from the idea that Mario is a platformer at heart. So much of that game extends and expands on what players know about Mario's core movement abilities. It always feels like it makes sense. Sonic Frontiers has Sonic operate construction equipment in order to drop balls into cups, because that will trigger an even bigger ball to bust out of a wall for some reason. What does that have to do with anything? And by far the worst example of this comes at the game's halfway point, with the third island's final puzzle minigame. The Chaos Island Pinball Table. This plays like somebody heard that Sonic games contain pinball physics, so they threw something together to appease those fans. The idea is that you're supposed to earn 5 million points playing pinball in order to progress the story. The table itself is extremely simple. 5 round bumpers at the top with a scoop circling around them full of rings, with the requisite pair of triangle bumpers closer to the flippers at the bottom of the board. Opportunities to rack up points in this tiny little board are slim, but the idea is that the longer you go without losing a ball, the more you begin to build a score multiplier. Though you start out only earning a couple hundred points for hitting a bumper, by the end you're supposed to be getting tens of thousands of points per bounce, making that 5 million point goal seem not so bad. And for a lucky few, they'll only spend a couple of minutes in this pinball segment. But for everyone else, myself included, this pinball table is one of the game's worst nightmares. I have to get into the portal too? Now I am nervous. Please go up there. The overly simplified table and the chaotic nature of pinball itself combine with a physics engine that doesn't do a very good job keeping up with the ball. Like, did you know that pinball can be so random and chaotic that the pinball industry actually had to go before the California Supreme Court in the 1970s to prove it wasn't just gambling? That it was actually a game of skill and not a game of chance? Cops were actually busting up pinball machines because they thought it was illegally sidestepping gambling laws, and the pinball table manufacturers had to prove that it wasn't. That's because, to the average player, despite its simple mechanics, pinball can be a very difficult game to get good at. It's all about physics manipulation, and to the untrained eye, it can seem like winning is a matter of random luck. Now imagine the collision detection on the flippers can sometimes fail, and your ball can fall out of bounds even if you're playing it correctly. That's the Sonic Frontiers pinball puzzle. Even if you're playing it right, there's a chance it's going to break, and most people aren't even going to be playing it right. I like pinball, and this damn thing took me a half an hour to clear. And then, after you complete it, they have the audacity to have this little bit of dialogue where Sonic goes, "Boy, it sure is weird to have a pinball table inside this volcano. I guess everybody just loves pinball." And I just, ugh. Sonic Team needs to stop putting pinball tables into Sonic games, because I don't think they've ever gotten it right or made it feel natural in the slightest. Not in Sonic Heroes, not in Sonic 4, not in Sonic Lost World, and definitely not in Sonic Frontiers. The only time it ever felt reasonable was in Sonic Generations, where it was an optional side activity quarantined off into an actual separate pinball table that you could totally ignore depending on what mood you were in. The pinball elements of old Sonic games, like in Casino Night Zone, were only ever a small fraction of what those levels actually offered, whereas every modern implementation of pinball into a Sonic game is not only forcing way too much pinball into the middle of a platformer, it never even works right. And in Sonic Frontiers, it's just more evidence that these people don't know what to do with this character. It's bad pinball, and it's bad Sonic. Enemies in Sonic games haven't mattered for a while. Starting as far back as Sonic Rush on the Nintendo DS in 2005, enemies mainly existed as a way to refill your boost meter, and you did that by crashing through them at top speed. Your main hazards since then have been spikes and bottomless pits, both of which were more about testing your reflexes than engaging in combat. Sonic Frontiers goes in the opposite direction, slowing Sonic down considerably and presenting you with enemies that are more than simply just cannon fodder. Littered around open worlds are 3 tiers of enemies for Sonic to fight. You got these basic Phantasy Star Online looking monsters, the larger and more dangerous Guardians that drop portal gears upon defeat, and the gigantic Titans lurking at the end of each island that are so strong Sonic's only hope at defeating them is to transform into Super Sonic using the Chaos Emeralds. All of them must be fought with a combination of punches and kicks, something that Sonic games have only dabbled with over time. Sonic the Hedgehog has never really been much of a melee fighter in the past. Usually, if he's throwing hands, it's relegated to a forgotten spin-off like Sonic the Fighters or Sonic Battle. It's sort of like getting Sonic to drive a car. Yes, there are games where he can do it, but it's not really what he's about. But then, as we covered earlier, Sonic isn't about anything these days, is he? Nothing matters anymore. Embrace nihilism. All kidding aside, there is at least some history here, but it's history worth leaving behind if we're being honest. Sonic games have been obsessed with RPG mechanics as far back as the original Sonic Adventure, when Takashi Iizuka pitched it as a Sonic & Knuckles RPG. This most directly manifested in Sonic Heroes, where enemies were given life bars. This made it so that most enemies had to be hit more than once to deplete their life bar, and you could collect power cores to level up and deal more damage. The ability to power up your character by defeating enemies was also planned to be part of Sonic 06, but the feature was never finished, just leaving us with enemies that take multiple hits to destroy. And then there's Sonic Unleashed, where you had the Werehog. There, punching enemies will provide you with experience points gems that can be used to power up strength, health, and more. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that the Werehog isn't so bad, but only after you max out all his meters. Until you do that, fights are a difficult slog, with spongy enemies that take way too many hits to kill. Now, when I did my gut check reaction video to Sonic Frontiers, I had a surprising number of comments from people calling me out over my dislike of Sonic fist fighting, because they thought giving Sonic more melee combat was a great idea. For them, they welcomed adding more depth to the game. For me, I was reminded of 2 things. One, that Sega has said fans frequently requested shooting be added to Sonic games, leading to the notorious turd known as Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, there was a lot wrong with Shadow, but making a game where you run really fast but then have to stop dead in your tracks to shoot an assault rifle was extra dumb. And 2, that eternally relevant clip from The Simpsons where a focus group director asked the kids what they want to see in the next season of their favorite cartoon show, Itchy and Scratchy.
Okay, how many of you kids would like Itchy and Scratchy to deal with real-life problems like the ones you face every day? And who would like to see them do just the opposite, getting into far-out situations involving robots and magic powers? So, you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots.
That's right. Good. And also, you should win things by watching.
Sonic games have been trying on and off for a very long time to find ways to expand Sonic's combat, and it never makes sense or works out. Even if Sonic has been suffering an identity crisis, stopping to fight enemies is completely antithetical to most of what you do in these games. I sometimes compare Sonic to The Flash, and it's like, how many times do you ever see The Flash get into a fist fight? It's kind of rare because The Flash is so fast that most people can't even touch him, and if he does have to use his fists, it's more likely he's the first and only person to land a blow. Sonic has almost never needed to use his fists before, and probably wouldn't even be very good with them anyway. Sonic the Hedgehog is a living buzzsaw that is faster than the speed of sound, which, if you didn't know, is over 700 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, here's a clip from Mythbusters of a rocket-propelled sled hitting 650 miles per hour. In that context, trying to get a player to slow down and punch out some life bars seems a little pointless. It's like asking for melee combat to be added to a super fast game like, I don't know, F-Zero.
Welcome! Punch!
And the worst part of all of this is that despite my protesting, the combat in Sonic Frontiers isn't even that bad. Or at least, it's not bad at first. When you're on that first island fighting the most basic enemies, it's kind of fun mashing out easy combos and chaining together Sonic's crazier attacks. But by that second island, Sonic Frontiers reveals its true form. You don't just get enemies that block your attacks, you get enemies that become impossible to touch in any context at all. The only way to break them out of this form is to circle them with Sonic's new Psyloop ability, which just makes everything take even longer. So not only do you have to make a conscious decision to slow down and fight, but you have to double up on that and Psyloop them when they start turtling your attacks. Whatever small amount of fun there is to have in that combat system immediately vanishes. Now, earlier I mentioned that you don't really need to do anything in this game if you don't want to. Though the game gestures at the structure of getting certain collectibles for doing things like beating up enemies, you can just find a lot of this stuff hidden around the open world if you go looking for it. Heck, Big the Cat even has a fishing minigame where he'll just straight up sell you a lot of the collectibles. You can skip almost everything if you don't want to do it. Ergo, if you don't want to fight enemies, well, you should be able to avoid them, right? Well, not really, no. Though there are some enemies you can safely bypass, even by the second island you're going to start encountering monsters that force you to engage with them. Like these umbrella-looking enemies. Get too close to one and the camera will automatically focus on them while they set up their attack. Doesn't matter what direction you're running in, what you were doing, doesn't matter if you try and take control of the camera back, if you accidentally activate one, you aren't allowed to ignore them until they're done. And the further you get into the game, the more they start introducing enemies like this that won't let you ignore them. The Guardians are the worst offenders. Just like with the basic enemies, the Guardians you fight on that first island are kind of fun. The rest of the Guardians... Most of them center around completing an arbitrary gimmick in order to reach or expose their weak point, after which you're given a tiny window to run up and punch them a few times. You will often have to repeat this loop 2 or 3 times just to defeat one Guardian. And if you activate a Guardian, not only does the entire game stop to show you their intro every single time, but you're often repositioned so that you can fight them. Like, check it out. I'm running through the desert here, and I accidentally activate the Shark Guardian. Once his intro is over, the game makes sure I'm pointed directly at him, even though by the time he activated, I had already run long past him. It's not even the worst offender either. Some Guardians will trap you in their minigame if you make the mistake of activating them by accident. Like Tank here, who basically pulls Sonic into a sandstorm the moment he wakes up. No part of this is ever very fun. There's a simple joy in mashing buttons and watching flashy animations, sure, but the instant this game tries to showcase any kind of depth or variety in its combat system, it proves to be embarrassingly frustrating. I'm a longtime veteran of games like Bayonetta, and to a lesser extent, Devil May Cry, and can definitely feel Sonic Frontiers trying to peel off a little bit of that DNA here. It just doesn't work. Those games are very much about the precision of knowing what attacks to use when, and timing your defensive maneuvers to punish the enemy's weakness. They require skill, finesse, and observation. Sonic Frontiers is about mashing buttons until mashing doesn't work anymore, and then holding down an infinite parry so that you can keep mashing. When that stops being fun, the game tries to make combat about something else entirely that's even worse. Rarely does it ever flow together well or feel very satisfying. Sonic Frontiers doesn't know what it's doing, and Sonic games with deeper combat systems like this have never known what they're doing. The last major piece of the Sonic Frontiers gameplay loop are the Cyberspace levels. Once you collect enough portal gears and slot it into the portal throne thingy, Sonic enters Cyberspace. This is where the game transitions from the open-world brawler into something more closely resembling the traditional gameplay seen in games like Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations. There's supposed to be some weird story justification that what Sonic is seeing in cyberspace is being generated from his memories, which basically boils down to an excuse to reuse levels from past Sonic games yet again. We have 4 different environments: Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant Zone, Sky Sanctuary Zone, and a new nondescript city area, internally known as Eternal Highway Zone. And that's it. Every one of Sonic Frontiers' 38 levels takes place in one of these 4 tile sets, shaking out to roughly 9 levels per environment. So, if you're like me and have been tired of how often they've been recycling Green Hill Zone, well, this game has a lot of Green Hill Zone. No, you know what? Scratch that. Sonic Frontiers has more Green Hill Zone than any Sonic game ever produced in the last 30 years. 1/4 of this entire game is Green Hill Zone. And that's terrible. To make matters worse, out of those 38 levels, only 8 of them are original creations. Close to 80% of this game are just levels they've pulled from past Sonic games, with a flimsy excuse that we're experiencing Sonic's memories, as if the last 5 games haven't also been about memories, or going back in time, or seeing holograms of the past, or whatever. Heck, Sonic Lost World didn't even have any of those things. It was supposed to be this mysterious forgotten planet, and it still had a Green Hill Zone motif in it. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Having multiple decades of Sonic games with new, varied locations, only to suddenly say, "Oh, we're going back to Green Hill Zone and we're never leaving," really, really stinks. These games used to be about so much more than how Motobugs are Sonic's Goombas and Green Hill Zone is his Mushroom Kingdom.
I hate mushrooms.
And these cyberspace levels really do drop you out of the open world stuff, by the way. Once you enter one, your ability to punch and kick is deleted, all your stats get locked down to specific levels, you can't use the side loop anymore, and they completely turn off camera controls. While that's probably supposed to make this feel more like a regular Sonic game, it just highlights how weird the controls in Sonic Frontiers really are. In the best 3D Sonic games, Sonic has a rhythm to his movement. You enter a flow state where every action feeds into the next in a long, seamless, daredevil chain of events. Sonic Frontiers, much like Sonic Forces, doesn't seem to understand this. It will present you with a path forward, but every step you take is designed to mess with your flow and slow you down. Take the homing attack. In most 3D Sonic games, you lock onto nearby enemies and can chain together a series of strikes quickly and effectively. Boom, 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 like the beat of a drum. In Sonic Frontiers, every single homing attack is this long, sluggish ordeal where you fly in, pause for impact, and then get bounced away by the explosion. Comparatively, it feels like each homing attack takes an absolute eternity, and there's nothing you can do to speed it up. It's so slow that it almost feels like a punishment, which it is because cyberspace levels rank you on how quickly you can finish a level. Instead of being a quick shortcut or a method of traversal like in past Sonic games, the homing attack in Sonic Frontiers exists as a time penalty. If you have to use it, it's treated like you're doing something wrong. While there are people out there who think the homing attack was overpowered in past Sonic games, I personally can't find value in celebrating making these games less accessible. But that's just me. Besides, even if you try to destroy enemies the old-fashioned way, it's still treated like this big, slow time penalty. Slow is the name of the game, really. If you're unfortunate enough to get into one of Sonic Frontier's side-scrolling levels, prepare yourself for some of the slowest Sonic gameplay the franchise has ever seen. Slower than Sonic Lost World, slower than Sonic Boom, and, depending on how you look at it, even slower than Sonic Labyrinth on the Game Gear. Or at least, that's how it feels to me. You pull down the boost trigger, and Sonic moves slower than Mario in the original Super Mario Bros. From 1985. While boosting! When in other games, boosting does this. Which makes Sonic Frontiers feel like this. It brings me no joy to say that I think these cyberspace levels may actually be the worst parts of Sonic Frontiers. It's a bunch of levels you've already played before, except they now both look worse and play worse than they did back in their original games. Why on earth would I want to play an awkward port of Sky Rail set in Green Hill Zone when I could just load up Sonic Adventure 2 and play the real Sky Rail? Like, Sonic Frontiers, at least as of this writing, is a brand new, full-priced game. Sonic Adventure 2 currently sells on Steam for $10, and frequently gets discounted for even less, for a game that plays better. Or why would I want to play a version of classic Sonic's Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic Generations that is even slower and more clumsy than the original? Because I like the fake CRT effect and the trippy skybox now? Honestly, I wish I could turn those off and make Sonic Frontiers look like a normal game. Though, even if I could, I'm willing to bet the level will still look better in Sonic Generations, a game that's more than 10 years old and considerably more fun to play. If you're gonna bring back old levels like this, you have to make sure you're actually meaningfully improving on them in some way, not just porting them to save money on development costs. To be fair, when you do happen upon one of the original levels, it doesn't feel quite as bad. It's still not great, but at least you get levels that feel like they were made to work with the game's strange control quirks instead of against them. But those are so few and far between that it hardly matters. The rest of the game was not made to be played like this, and as a result, Cyberspace has that strange, uncanny valley vibe of just feeling wrong. Just like the story, just like the open world, just like every part of Sonic Frontiers.
Damn, not here.
You could say that I went into Sonic Frontiers already skeptical of what it was trying to do. But the fact of the matter is, I think an open-world Sonic game is a genuinely good idea. Sonic has needed more room to run around in for a long time. Sonic Frontiers just doesn't stick the landing. Its world feels boring and unimportant, clogged full of so much clutter and distraction that it's hard to tell what you're even looking at sometimes. Even when you get a chance to step back and view it for what it is, it feels completely one-dimensional. The melee combat system is the same square peg they've been trying to force into a round hole for decades, and it still doesn't fit. A platformer where enemies have life bars is bad enough, but then Sonic Frontiers gets bored of its own ideas, and by then the toilet's already been flushed. And once you get to the part of the game that actually plays the most like a Sonic game, it's almost entirely stuff you've already seen before, but now worse in every way. When Sega claimed they were targeting high review scores with Sonic Frontiers, what that apparently meant was them blindly chasing trends rather than believing in or understanding good ideas. It meant giving Sonic a skill tree, because skill trees are popular, but then you max out that skill tree less than a fourth of the way through the game. By the time I finished Sonic Frontiers, I had more than 400 skill tree points that I couldn't spend, because I already finished the skill tree 20 hours ago. A number of developers have tried their hand at making their own Breath of the Wild. From Ubisoft with Phoenix Rising to, yes, even the villainous
Genshin Impact.
Unfortunately for us, Sega chose Sonic to be their guinea pig here. Rarely does Sonic Frontiers feel like a Sonic game, even in the face of elements that feel increasingly desperate to remind us of which franchise this is. There are great moments in Sonic Frontiers. I didn't really have space to talk about it anywhere else, but the soundtrack is incredible. The music in the previous game, Sonic Forces, was awful. It was like baby's first EDM. The music for Frontiers is basically an apology for that. Every single Cyberspace song is a jam. I also forgot to mention it, but the Supersonic boss fights look absolutely incredible. Like somebody at Sega was trying to capture a little bit of that Metal Gear Rising energy. The first two are amazing spectacles, but even they start to lose their appeal by the game's halfway point. The strong focus on good characterization in the writing is also very welcome, but the story spends too much time spinning its wheels to feel very satisfying overall. For every step Sonic Frontiers makes forward, it still feels like it takes more than 2 steps back, and many of those steps are in the wrong direction. For all the cheering this game received declaring that Sonic's back, it still feels too much like business as usual in some really depressing ways. And that's the end of the video, though if you stick around, I've got a lot of house cleaning to do since it's been like 5 months since my last video, and a lot has happened. Though, as a general reminder, I will also say since my videos can be so spread out, you should really consider subscribing and ringing the bell for notifications so that you don't miss any of my future uploads. First up, I've started a second channel where I'm going to be putting up gameplay clips in stream archives. In retrospect, it was kinda weird that I tried to make this channel both my personal channel to dump random junk and also a channel where I published meticulous essays, video reviews, and modding tutorials. So I'm not gonna do that anymore. This channel right here will be exclusively for narrated, edited content going forward. And the second channel will be for clips and streams. There's never been a better time to subscribe to this channel, and maybe the second channel too, you know, if you want to. Secondly, I finally opened up my Discord to the public. Right now it's pretty chill and quiet, and I think that's pretty cool. I'm not gonna beg anyone to join since there are like thousands of Discords out there, but if hanging out in a chat room with me sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the video description. Third, I finally revamped my Patreon a little bit. I got rid of 2 outdated tiers and replaced them with a new high-value tier. If there's ever been a game you want me to talk about, you can now basically force me to do a video about it, for better or worse. It's not a cheap tier, and depending on how things go, I might even increase the price in the future. I tried to anticipate common questions and wrote out a big page providing answers and some guidelines, so if you're interested in that, there's also a link to that in the video description too. And since I brought up my Patreon, I'm gonna thank a few names real quick. A warm welcome to new patrons Reversal Mushroom, A Green Guy, Tin Roof, Riley Rosell, and K-Loss. Plus a very big thank you to High Rollers Ed Boy, Gadget Feather, Jet Set Set, Dragon, Keith Stack, Mark Bradshaw, Melko Driggs, Sam Beans, Setsune Wave, Sofox, and this dorky guy. I know I don't put out super frequent uploads, but I thank you all for your patience. I put a lot of thought into videos like this, and I hope it shows. If you'd like to make all this work feel worth it for me, you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/blazehedgehog. It's the best way to ensure that this channel keeps growing. I still do everything by myself, but it might be nice to think about maybe hiring an editor someday to help speed up the release schedule, you know? I have a lot of plans and clearly not enough time to do them all by myself. I also personally need the money because recently I found out that a bunch of the cardboard boxes housing a lot of my stuff in storage gave out over the winter, so I'll need to buy some durable containers and see if anything's damaged. And those things are expensive. If you're like me and also out here just trying to survive, dropping a like and a comment or even subscribing is a great way to help me out that doesn't cost any money, as stereotypical as that might sound. I've also turned on YouTube's Super Thanks button, which I think will allow you to donate money directly on the video itself. I've also opened up a Throne Gifts page where you can crowdfund items on a wish list. A couple of people have already crowdfunded me a copy of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which I was streaming over on my Twitch channel like 2 or 3 months ago. That game really slowed down production on this video, let me tell you. Speaking of streaming, in the sponsor segment, I also mentioned that Sage is coming up. Since there are too many games at the thing to write about these days, I'll probably be doing a live stream or two on my Twitch channel where I play a bunch of games from that. So if you don't follow me on Twitch, maybe also think about that. A big thanks once again to SNHU for sponsoring this video. If you're one of the people still watching this video all the way to the end here, really think about signing up for that SNHU information. It'll help both of us out. Anyway, oh boy, that was the longest video I've ever made for this channel. No wonder it took so long, huh? I guess I need to accept that this might be the new norm. I guess we'll find out if that's true in the next video together. See you next time.
Boom!